I think we have 7.2 billion food experts on the planet today, and that's part of the problem. It's crazy from the point of view of managing this planet that sustainable products cost more than unsustainable products. Yeah. In fact, it ought to be just the opposite. And the question is, how do we make that flip? And one of the things that I've kind of come to believe is that consumers shouldn't have a choice about sustainability, that all the products on the shelves ought to be sustainable. And the question is how you make that happen. And there's insights into how you make that happen. So 3 weeks ago or so in New York at the climate week-long meetings, 3 global trading companies committed that 100% of the palm oil they sell, which is 70% of that produced in the world, will be produced without deforestation. So play that forward. What does that mean? That means that it doesn't matter whether the companies in US or Europe or the consumers in China or India want to buy sustainable palm oil or not. That's what they're going to get because that's what those companies are going to deliver at no extra cost. No premium, just business as usual, sustainable palm oil. And that's what we need to be working towards. So how do we make that happen? On the consumption level, at World Wildlife Fund, we've started thinking about how we engage about that, because this is an extremely sensitive and political and probably a third rail issue if you don't do it right. Let's get real here. A group like World Wildlife Fund in 50 plus years of existence has spent about $10 billion on conservation. A Fortune 100 company in the food business spends $10 billion a year in advertising. Who's going to win that battle? So we've got to actually engage companies in this conversation. They have got to be part of this conversation, and they've got to see it in their self-interest that sustainable consumption is good for their business. And that's the conversation that needs to be had. Because if we're saying one thing and people are getting inundated with other messages, it's going to be a waste of money.
Does anyone have any questions in the audience?
Thank you. I think the reason why sustainable foods cost more than unsustainable foods is because unsustainable foods are subsidized, and so that gets back to our government and our democracy and how we address that. But I just wanted to, I was very glad you raised the issue about consumption, Ellen, and I wanted to say that we keep tiptoeing around this issue, and we have tiptoed around this issue as far as climate change and emissions go, and we tiptoe around this issue where food goes, then I think we're back in the same position that we're in. So I think when we talk about food, we should not talk about the fact that population is increasing from 7 to 9 billion, because that is not the cause of our food crisis. The cause of our food crisis is the top maybe 100 million Chinese or 100 million Indians who are starting to consume like we have been consuming for a very long time. So really, I mean, if we want to consume at this rate, even if it's food, we can only sustain probably 1 or 2 billion people on this planet. So when we talk about the 9 billion, I think we tend to deflect all of our attention to population issues, and those are the people who are actually at the bottom of the food chain, who don't actually have, the impact we've had on the planet is not coming because of those 2 additional billion. It's coming and has been there over the last 50 years or more because of the way we have been consuming, whether it's fisheries or whether it's deforestation of the Amazon. So I think to bring in the 9 billion is really a terribly confusing issue and sort of obfuscates, the points that we're trying to make. Anybody who wants to address the comment?
I completely agree with you on the 9 billion. If you just do the math, 7 to 9 billion, that's not a doubling, right? That's a 20% plus increase. So why are we talking about needing to double the food supply? It is because of diet, right? It is a shift towards meat. It's the shift towards doing things where you have to grow more calories in order to ingest more calories for people.
The issue for me is about consumption, and it's about income, and much more than population. And I think that one of the things that you see in every single country where income increases is that all segments of population begin to eat more animal protein. Not as much in lower income groups, but food is an interesting thing. When people have more money, it's one of those things that's very divisible. You can actually have a little bit of money at the end of the week and buy animal protein in a way that you couldn't in the past. And we see that, fueling pork consumption in China. in dairy and egg consumption in India. We see every country is a little different. Some places it's fish, some places it's beef, some places it's pork, it's chicken, whatever. But there is that relationship. So I don't think it's just the 200 million new consumers in Asia that are driving this. I think it's a little bit more integrated than that. Clearly at the top there's more consumption. But I also want to pick up on what you said about subsidies, because I think it's important and it hasn't come up yet. Subsidies are a killer of innovation. And I think what we find is that when farmers farm subsidies, there's no reason to change. When you ask farmers to perform better, then you actually get real innovation. And when you start setting performance levels, then farmers have a reason to change. That's why the new certification programs that are based on performance actually have a real impact on the ground. But here's a little thing that's been going on in the last 5 years or so that's worth noting. The biggest subsidies for agriculture on the planet have shifted from the US and Europe. China now has subsidies that, depending on your source of data, are equal to or double the US and Europe combined. India has subsidies that are equal to US and Europe combined. Brazil has subsidies that are 3 times the US, not quite equal to Europe yet. The subsidies in BRICS are going to kill innovation precisely when we need it. And Brazil has been extremely innovative. China, in its own way, has been very innovative. But these kinds of subsidies are going to erode that when we need it most. But just to put the subsidy issue kind of in its final context, the biggest subsidy, by far bigger than all governments combined, is the subsidy from the planet. The planet is subsidizing food production because we are robbing the planet. We are mining the planet for natural resources.
That is a great place to stop.